In the bleak winter of the Eastern Front, where steel froze before dawn and engines groaned under the weight of endless war, one silent battle raged far from the front lines. A battle fought not with guns or shells, but with time. Every destroyed Soviet tank meant lives lost, ground surrendered, and precious hours slipping away. The German generals were confident once a T-34 was disabled, it would take weeks to repair, transport, refit, and return to combat. In their calculations, Soviet armor would eventually collapse under the strain. But they had not accounted for one man, a quiet engineer with an imagination as sharp as the steel he worked with. His name was Alexander Morozov, and he was about to rewrite the rules of mechanized warfare. Morozov, chief of Soviet tank maintenance, understood the brutal truth better than anyone. The front was moving too fast, the battles were too large, and the losses were too heavy. Repair factories deep inside Soviet territory were working around the clock, but the distances were killing the war effort. Trains were overloaded, roads were ruined, and every tank that left the front lines for repairs risked never returning at all. Something radical had to change. And in the middle of that chaos, Morozov conceived an idea that commanders first labeled impossible. What if a T-34 didn't have to travel hundreds of miles to be repaired? What if it could be torn apart, rebuilt, and rolled back into combat right next to the battlefield, sometimes within a single week? It sounded insane. It sounded dangerous. But Morozov believed it could be done. His vision demanded a new way of thinking, a modular system of repairs, where the tank wasn't treated as a massive steel beast, but as a puzzle made of parts that could be swapped, replaced, and reassembled using portable equipment. Instead of sending tanks to the factories, Morozov wanted to bring the factory to the tanks. The plan called for mobile workshops, cranes that folded like steel spiders, traveling teams of mechanics, and a standardized set of components that fit together no matter where the tank was built. For the first time, damaged T-34s could be stripped down to their bones on muddy frontline ground, fitted with new transmissions, re-welded armor plates, or rebuilt engines, without ever heading back to distant repair depots. And so, in early 1943, as battles raged across the snowy plains, Morozov's system was put to the test. A T-34 limped in from the front, tracks shattered, turret jammed, hull dented from German anti-tank rounds. Under old procedures, this machine would have been shipped hundreds of miles away and lost to the front for a month or more. But now, under the glow of makeshift lamps and the roar of portable generators, Morozov's mechanics surrounded the wounded tank like battlefield surgeons. Panels were removed. The engine was hoisted out with a collapsible crane. A fresh powertrain brought in by truck slid into place with perfect alignment. Welding torches sparked through the darkness as armor plates were patched. The tank's heart, its diesel engine, coughed, then roared back to life. Soldiers nearby stared in disbelief. This was not weeks of waiting. This was not a logistical nightmare. It was a rebirth completed in days. By the seventh morning, the tank rumbled forward, ready to return to the very battlefield where it had been knocked out. Whispers spread through Soviet ranks. T-34s were coming back faster. German intelligence reports noted the impossible. Tanks they believed destroyed were reappearing in combat almost immediately. At first, commanders dismissed the reports as errors. But as more and more T-34s returned to the field with uncanny speed, German strategists realized something was very wrong with their assumptions. They thought the Soviet machine would break under pressure. Instead, it was accelerating. Morozov's system didn't just repair tanks, it multiplied Soviet strength. Every tank restored near the front meant reinforcements arriving without delay. Every week saved meant more armored pressure against German lines. The Eastern Front wasn't slowing down, it was gaining momentum. As Soviet forces pushed westward, Morozov traveled with them, refining the system, expanding it, and training teams to replicate the process at scale. Soon, temporary repair zones were appearing just miles behind active fighting, clusters of tools, tents, mechanics, and cranes that formed a lifeline for the Soviet armored divisions. Tanks rolled in battered and broken and rolled out reborn, each one a testament to Morozov's engineering genius. Crews came to see him as a legend, a man whose mind kept them alive. If their tank was hit, if the track snapped or the gearbox failed, they no longer felt they were doomed. They knew they had a chance. They knew Morozov's system would give their machine a second life. The impact on morale was electrifying. When soldiers believe their machines will return, they fight harder, they take risks, and they hold their ground longer. German commanders, accustomed to exploiting long Soviet repair times, suddenly faced a terrifying new reality. The T-34s they destroyed were reappearing in numbers that defied logic. A unit that should have been crippled was somehow maintaining full operational strength. A tank battalion reduced to half was being restored overnight. The German front line heard a sound they came to fear, a low diesel growl echoing across the plains, signaling that the T-34s were back again. And behind every one of those returns, behind every resurrected engine, behind every tank crew that climbed once more into a machine they thought lost, stood Alexander Morozov, quiet, relentless, sleeves rolled, eyes locked on the future of the war. The Germans underestimated him. They saw Soviet tanks as crude. They saw Soviet logistics as weak. But they had forgotten that innovation doesn't always come from lavish resources. It comes from necessity, desperation, and brilliance forged under fire. Morozov's impossible repair system became one of the unsung triumphs of the war, a silent revolution that kept the T-34, the backbone of Soviet armor, constantly in motion. By the time the Red Army surged toward Berlin, thousands of tanks had been restored under Morozov's methods, each one contributing to the relentless pressure that finally broke the Wehrmacht. His system allowed the Soviets not just to fight, but to outlast, out-repair, and out-return their enemy. And when historians look back on the Eastern Front, they speak of numbers, strategies, and battles. But hidden behind those colossal victories is a man who understood that a war can be won not only with firepower, but with the ability to rebuild what the enemy destroys. Morozov didn't just fix tanks. He gave the Red Army speed, resilience, and a weapon no one could see. The power to return again and again, as if nothing could stop them. In the end, his impossible idea became a lifeline for an entire front, a force multiplier that changed the rhythm of war. And on those frozen fields where destroyed tanks once lay abandoned for months, the ground now echoed with the sound of engines reborn, machines that refused to die, soldiers that refused to retreat, and a nation that refused to collapse. All because one engineer dared to look at a broken tank and see not ruin, but possibility.